They always said silence is golden, but what if silence was actually screaming at full volume inside your mind? Welcome to What If Horizons, the show where we take a sledgehammer to reality and see what falls out. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most mind-bending possibilities of them all. What if we could communicate telepathically? No speaking, no typing, not even texting passive-aggressive emojis to your coworkers. Just pure, unfiltered thought, beamed directly from one brain to another like some kind of cosmic Wi-Fi, only without the buffering wheel of doom. First, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room, or rather, the herd of elephants that would now be stampeding through your head if telepathy became real. Because unlike casual conversations where you can fake a smile while internally plotting your escape, telepathic communication would turn every private thought into a public broadcast. Imagine sitting in a meeting while thinking, yet again, that your boss's new management strategy is basically just corporate Mad Libs. Now imagine your boss hearing that exact thought as you think it. Unfiltered honesty, whether you want it or not. But let's back up a bit before we all spiral into collective panic. Humans have been dreaming of telepathy for centuries. Science fiction is basically telepathy's #1 fan club. From the mind-melding Vulcans of Star Trek to Professor Ten reading minds in X-Men, the idea has been romanticized, feared, and endlessly speculated upon. But is there any actual science behind it? Well, sort of. Enter the world of neuroscience, where researchers have already dipped their toes into the shallow end of brain-to-brain communication. Using devices like EEGs, which measure electrical activity in the brain, scientists have managed to transmit simple messages between two people. Of course, these messages are usually something underwhelming like yes or no, but hey, baby steps. The real goal is far more ambitious. Translating the complex symphony of neural activity that makes up your thoughts, emotions, memories, and embarrassing song lyrics stuck in your head into clear, shareable information. This would require technology capable of decoding the brain's electrical signals in real time, converting them into something intelligible, and then transmitting them to another brain capable of interpreting them accurately. In other words, we would need to build the world's most invasive, precise, and frankly terrifying translator. Now let's say we crack the code. After decades of research, trial, and error, humanity finally creates a functional, reliable, telepathic communication system. It's sleek, non-invasive, and available in every major electronics store right next to the newest smartphones that nobody actually needs but everyone buys anyway. Suddenly, the way we interact with the world is fundamentally altered overnight. Conversations would become instantaneous. No more struggling to find the right words, no more awkward pauses, no more painfully misinterpreted text messages that somehow lead to your cousin being uninvited from your wedding. Instead, your full intention, emotion, and nuance would be conveyed directly, perfectly, like a high-definition live stream of your inner monologue. But here's where things get messy. Because while telepathy solves the problem of miscommunication, it opens up a Pandora's box of ethical, psychological, and social dilemmas that would make even the most seasoned philosopher want to crawl into a sensory deprivation tank. For one thing, what happens to privacy? In a world where every stray thought could be broadcasted accidentally, how do we establish boundaries? You might be trying to compliment your date on their fascinating conversation about artisanal cheeses, but your brain is simultaneously wondering if their nostrils are slightly asymmetrical. Did they get to hear both? Do you get to choose which thoughts are shared? Or is it an all-or-nothing mental free-for-all where everyone's subconscious becomes the latest form of reality entertainment? And speaking of dating, imagine the nightmare fuel that would be first dates in the telepathic era. No more polite nodding while secretly counting down the seconds until dessert. Now your date knows exactly how bored you are, how many mental notes you're making about their weird laugh, and how you're internally debating whether their love of taxidermy is charmingly eccentric or a massive red flag. Even worse, think about how social media would evolve. Right now, we're already oversharing with selfies, tweets, and rage-filled comment sections. With telepathy, influencers could stream their actual thoughts in real time to millions of followers. Imagine live streaming your unfiltered brain to an audience that can literally feel your emotions as you feel them. Congratulations, we've just invented the world's most terrifying version of reality TV. But it's not all doom, gloom, and awkward first dates. There are undeniable benefits too. Language barriers would vanish overnight. No more struggling with French verb conjugations or pretending you understand your uncle's thick accent from the old country. Everyone's thoughts would translate automatically, creating a global language of pure intent and meaning. Diplomatic negotiations could become far more honest, or at least far more entertaining when world leaders realize that yes, everyone really does think that one guy is being unreasonable. Education would be revolutionized. Instead of spending years learning complex subjects, information could be transferred directly into your brain like downloading a new app. Want to master advanced calculus, speak Mandarin, and play the violin? Done. Just a quick brain update and you're ready to join Mensa, perform at Carnegie Hall, and confuse everyone at parties. But with great power comes great risk, and telepathic communication is no exception. What happens when someone hacks into your thoughts? If our minds become part of a neural network, are they now vulnerable to the same cybersecurity threats as our computers? Imagine waking up one day with an uninvited advertiser beaming product placements into your dreams. Forget pop-up ads. Welcome to Pop in Thoughts. And then there's the dark side of human nature. Manipulative individuals could exploit telepathic abilities to gaslight, coerce, or even brainwash others with frightening efficiency. Governments could implement thought surveillance programs, monitoring citizens for deviant or subversive ideas. The phrase thought crime would no longer be Orwellian fiction but terrifying reality. Even in our personal lives, the implications are staggering. Arguments would escalate faster as every impulsive, hurtful thought gets shared instantly. Passive-aggressive behavior would die out, not because we've matured, but because there's no longer any way to suppress the real aggression. Family dinners would become emotional minefields where every snarky thought about your mother-in-law's cooking lands like a grenade on the table. Workplace dynamics would shift dramatically too. Office politics would reach absurd new heights when your coworkers know exactly how you feel about the mandatory trust-building retreat involving zip lines and forced enthusiasm. Performance reviews would be brutal honesty fests where everyone's unfiltered opinions are laid bare, leaving HR departments drowning in a sea of grievances. But perhaps the most profound impact would be on human identity itself. We are creatures of private thought. Our inner worlds define who we are. By exposing those private realms, telepathy could fundamentally alter what it means to be an individual. Would we become more empathetic, understanding each other on a deeper level? Or would we become more guarded, paranoid, and emotionally exhausted from constant mental exposure? Of course, some would embrace this new era wholeheartedly. Entire subcultures would emerge, celebrating radical mental openness. Telepathic communes where everyone shares every thought, feeling, and sensation like a collective consciousness. Utopian dream or dystopian nightmare? Probably both, depending on who you ask and how often they argue. Religious and philosophical movements would also wrestle with the implications. Concepts of confession, sin, and moral purity would be redefined when nothing can be hidden. The idea of free will might itself be questioned if external influences can so easily shape our thoughts. And let's not forget the purely bizarre side effects. Would we develop mental accents based on our culture or upbringing? Could you accidentally send someone a mental typo, like thinking of a cat when you meant to think of a car? Would your brain autocorrect? And how many people would accidentally broadcast that one catchy jingle stuck in their head to everyone around them at an opportune moments? Of course, before we all spiral into existential dread about mental typos and thought hackers, let's explore how telepathy could completely redefine entire industries. Take the entertainment business, for example. Right now, movies and television are visual and auditory experiences. With telepathy, we could directly beam full sensory experiences into people's minds. No more popcorn-stained cinema seats or overpriced tickets. Instead, you would feel the hero's adrenaline, taste their meals, experience their heartbreak, all from your couch. Hollywood would finally achieve what it's always wanted: total emotional manipulation, but with 5-star Yelp reviews. Writers would become obsolete, or at least face an uphill battle. Who needs novels when you can experience the author's imagination directly, complete with their emotions, sensory details, and subconscious weirdness? Though, to be fair, some authors' brains might be places best left unexplored. Then there's therapy. Mental health professionals might gain unprecedented access to a patient's unfiltered emotions, allowing for treatments that go far deeper than awkwardly asking, "And how does that make you feel?" Of course, therapists themselves would need nerves of steel, because hearing every single one of your patient's intrusive thoughts might make even the most Zen counselor consider early retirement and a long vacation. But wait, let's not forget marketing. Oh yes, the marketers will come. Right now, they rely on algorithms to predict your preferences based on your shopping history and suspiciously specific Facebook ads. With telepathy, they would know exactly what you desire, often before you consciously do. Imagine walking past a store and immediately receiving a telepathic sales pitch tailored to the very shoes you were mentally lusting after 2 seconds earlier. Capitalism would reach its ultimate form, a kind of psychic impulse buy utopia. Or dystopia, depending on your credit score. But before you panic, consider the possible upsides. Misunderstandings would become far less common. Relationships could thrive on brutal honesty, assuming you survive the initial shock of hearing every unfiltered complaint your partner has been mentally filing away for years. Conflict resolution might become more effective if both parties can immediately share their genuine emotions rather than their carefully curated arguments. And what about justice? Courtrooms could potentially use telepathic records of memories as evidence. Gone would be the days of unreliable witnesses or cleverly coached testimonies. Judges could directly access what actually happened, assuming of course, the memories themselves haven't been tampered with, distorted, or just outright repressed because, let's face it, brains are notoriously unreliable record keepers. Education would undergo a renaissance unlike anything seen before. Forget years spent memorizing dates, formulas, and facts you will never use again unless you become a contestant on some trivia game show. Knowledge could be directly transferred into your neural network. The phrase information overload would take on a whole new, very literal meaning. Students would go from cramming all night to plugging in for an instant data upload. On the downside, students would lose the ability to bond over mutual suffering during finals week, and coffee sales would likely plummet. Military applications, however, might veer into terrifying territory. Soldiers linked telepathically could coordinate with unparalleled efficiency, operating like a hive mind. But this level of connection also opens up horrifying possibilities for manipulation, remote control, or even psychological warfare where enemies could literally weaponize fear, doubt, and paranoia directly into the minds of their adversaries. The battlefield would shift from physical ground to mental territory. Speaking of hive minds, we should probably discuss that whole terrifying prospect. Telepathic networks could blur the line between individuals and collective consciousness. Picture billions of people mentally linked, constantly sharing data, emotions, experiences, and thoughts. On one hand, it sounds like the ultimate global unity. On the other, it sounds like the perfect recipe for mass confusion, groupthink, and complete loss of personal identity. Welcome to the great neural soup of humanity, where your deepest thoughts become public property and originality becomes suspiciously scarce. But as wild as this all sounds, the ethical questions may be the most challenging part of a telepathic future. Would children be born into a world where mental privacy is considered selfish? Would governments regulate which thoughts are appropriate to share? Who controls the bandwidth of the mind? Would there be mental firewalls? Subconscious ad blockers? Could you even legally own your own thoughts anymore, or would they become intellectual property subject to licensing agreements? Religion, too, would face seismic shifts. Confessionals would become obsolete. Prayers would no longer be whispered into the void but would stream directly to divine customer service lines, assuming the deity in question supports this new communication protocol. Sin itself might be redefined when no one can hide anything anymore. The entire notion of morality could pivot from what you do to what you think. Even humor might evolve. Right now, a joke relies on timing, delivery, and surprise. But if everyone hears your punchline before you even think to say it, comedy as we know it could disintegrate into a strange new form where people laugh before you even realize you were trying to be funny. Accidental comedians would become an epidemic. There's also the small matter of constant noise. Even now, with our current levels of connectivity, many people complain of information overload. Now imagine that multiplied by every person within telepathic range, all sharing snippets of their inner monologue. Traffic reports, grocery lists, random song lyrics, arguments with imaginary opponents who wronged you 3 years ago. It would all be inescapable mental background noise unless strict filters were in place. And even then, who gets to design those filters? One might argue that telepathic evolution could actually split humanity into factions. On one side, the connected, fully open telepaths. On the other, privacy purists who reject mental connectivity altogether, living in isolated enclaves where one can still savor the luxury of personal secrets and awkward small talk. The black market would thrive with new industries catering to mind-blocking devices, mental encryption services, and illegal brain filters that let you selectively censor your worst thoughts before anyone else hears them. It would be the golden age of thought piracy and neural counterintelligence. At its most extreme, we could see the rise of telepathic totalitarianism. Imagine regimes that not only police your behavior but monitor your thoughts, punishing unapproved ideas before they can manifest into action. Dissent would become a pre-crime, and the line between thought and deed would completely evaporate. The phrase "think positive" would stop being motivational advice and start becoming mandatory government policy. Of course, not everyone would adapt well. Some might suffer severe mental fatigue, unable to cope with the constant barrage of others' emotions and thoughts. Telepathic burnout could become a legitimate medical condition. Psychologists would need entirely new disciplines to help people manage the pressure of perpetual connectivity. Meditation retreats would transform into extreme isolation chambers where one could finally hear their own thoughts in peace. Even parenting would be revolutionized, and not always for the better. Children hearing every anxious, frustrated, or critical thought their parents have might grow up neurotic, or worse, too self-aware for their own good. On the flip side, teenagers would no longer have the luxury of secretly resenting their parents' rules. Every hormonal rebellion would be broadcast live, leading to either unprecedented honesty or unprecedented grounding. And yet, despite all these hazards, dangers, and absurd scenarios, one must admit that telepathy also holds the potential for profound human growth. If used carefully, it could foster unprecedented empathy, allowing people to truly understand one another's experiences and emotions without the usual filters of language and culture. The dream of world peace might actually creep closer, not through treaties and politics, but through genuine emotional resonance shared between individuals across the globe. In a way, we'd become both more exposed and more united, simultaneously fragile and resilient, navigating an entirely new frontier of human connection where every thought counts and no one can hide behind words anymore. Naturally, once you strip away the language barrier entirely, international diplomacy gets a massive upgrade. No more painstaking translations, no more misinterpreted handshakes or poorly chosen words at high-stakes summits. Leaders could instantly grasp one another's intentions, which sounds lovely in theory. In practice, however, they might also pick up the unspoken insults, the simmering resentment, and the involuntary comparisons between each other's questionable fashion choices. Global summits would quickly turn into glorified group therapy sessions, punctuated by awkward silences and forced smiles. Corporate negotiations would take on a whole new flavor as well. CEOs could read one another's bottom-line calculations before they even opened their mouths. The era of bluffing would vanish overnight. Entire departments dedicated to spinning the truth or massaging financial statements would become useless. The art of the poker face would be lost forever. Good luck closing that big merger if your mind keeps screaming this is a terrible deal at full volume. Now, let us turn our attention to the arts. Creativity thrives on misinterpretation, ambiguity, and the space between words. Telepathic art would be raw, unfiltered emotional experiences. A painter could project their entire vision directly into your mind, letting you see not just the final image but the journey of its creation, the emotion behind each brushstroke, and the existential crisis that fueled it. Concerts would become shared neural symphonies where performers transmit waves of pure feeling into the crowd. Forget lyrics, forget instruments. Music becomes emotion itself, pulsing directly through your consciousness. But as with any new frontier, there will be those who attempt to monetize the experience. Influencers would no longer need to perfect their lighting or curate their feed. They could simply broadcast their carefully manufactured personalities straight into your skull. Welcome to the Influencer Economy 2.0, where you literally subscribe to people's minds. Cancel culture would take on an entirely new level of immediacy. Think a problematic thought, and your followers could instantly ghost you, mentally and emotionally. Dating, of course, would be an absolute minefield. First dates would turn into instant vulnerability exercises. The moment you sit down across from your potential partner, every awkward thought, every shallow judgment, every self-conscious worry would spill out before the appetizers arrive. While this might accelerate compatibility screening, it would also guarantee that most first dates would end within the first 5 minutes. On the upside, you would finally know if someone genuinely likes you or is just politely tolerating your existence while planning their escape route. And consider the implications for crime. Criminal investigations would evolve dramatically. Detectives would have access to suspects' memories, intentions, and motives in real time. The notion of innocent until proven guilty would get murky when your own thoughts become evidence. Courts would require entire branches of mental forensic experts, specializing in distinguishing genuine memories from fabricated ones, separating subconscious noise from intent. But criminals would adapt too. New black market services would arise offering memory erasure, mental firewalls, and thought-masking technology. Organized crime would hire cognitive hackers to implant false memories or scramble witness testimonies. The phrase inside job would become disturbingly literal. Now imagine law enforcement itself. Telepathically linked officers could coordinate seamlessly, anticipate threats, and operate like a single organism. The police force would function as a collective consciousness, able to respond to emergencies with frightening efficiency. However, this also opens up enormous potential for abuse of power. If the people enforcing the law share one mind, who keeps them in check? Independent oversight becomes exponentially harder when dissenting voices are absorbed, or silenced, within the hive. On a more optimistic note, imagine the scientific collaborations. Researchers across the globe could link minds, combining knowledge, theories, and problem-solving abilities in real time. Scientific breakthroughs could accelerate at a pace previously unimaginable. Diseases cured, technologies invented, problems solved through the fusion of countless brilliant minds working as one. The potential is staggering. Of course, there's the darker side. Imagine corporate espionage taken to the extreme. Intellectual property could be stolen not by hackers breaking into servers, but by cognitive thieves who access proprietary knowledge directly from the brains of your top scientists and executives. The ultimate data breach would involve no data at all, just brains. Advertising would achieve terrifying levels of personalization. Companies would monitor your internal desires, impulses, and subconscious cravings to craft offers you simply cannot refuse. Targeted ads would shift from mildly creepy to aggressively unavoidable. You wouldn't see ads anymore. You would feel them. The jingle you hate would pop into your mind while you're asleep. The product you swore you didn't need would suddenly feel like a lifelong passion. Religious experiences would also undergo massive changes. No longer reliant on faith alone, believers might experience direct transmissions of divine messages, or so they claim. Religious leaders could share spiritual visions directly, making skepticism far more complicated. On the other hand, frauds and charlatans would abound, transmitting fake miracles and fabricated epiphanies into eager followers' minds. And let's not forget sports. Athletes linked telepathically to coaches could receive constant real-time adjustments mid-play. Team sports would become hyper-coordinated ballets of perfect execution. The drama of human error would largely vanish, replaced by synchronized efficiency. Fans might lament the loss of spontaneity, but bookmakers would rejoice at the end of unpredictable upsets, unless, of course, psychic match fixing became a thing. Education would see children graduating at record speeds. Entire curricula could be uploaded into young minds in days instead of years. But would they actually understand the material, or simply regurgitate prepackaged knowledge? The difference between wisdom and information would become glaringly obvious, with wisdom in dangerously short supply. Romance novels would become obsolete. Instead of reading about a passionate love story, you could simply beam the experience directly into your mind. Feel the heartbreak, joy, and awkward first kiss without ever leaving your bed. Authors might adapt by creating new experiences rather than stories, becoming more like emotional architects than writers. Mental health, meanwhile, would face an explosion of new disorders. Thought leakage, emotional feedback loops, group neuroses, and psychic identity crises would keep therapists extremely busy. New syndromes would emerge. Imagine anxiety echo disorder, where hearing others' anxiety amplifies your own until everyone spirals into shared panic. The self-help industry would pivot toward mental firewalling and cognitive detox retreats. Yet, despite these dangers, a telepathic society could foster unmatched compassion. When you truly feel others' pain, selfishness becomes far more difficult. Acts of cruelty lose their appeal when the victim's suffering ricochets through your own mind. We might, against all odds, become more humane. Naturally, Governments would not sit idle while the world dives headfirst into telepathic chaos. Bureaucrats would scramble to legislate this brave new cognitive frontier. Committees would draft telepathy privacy regulations, which is ironic considering that privacy would already be circling the drain. Debates would rage about the legality of mind reading in law enforcement, marriage counseling, and workplace evaluations. Lobbyists would flood legislative halls, arguing both for and against the commodification of human thought. And somewhere, a very confused group of elderly senators would demand to know whether they need to update their social media passwords for their brains. The insurance industry would enter its golden age of moral ambiguity. Mental liability policies would explode in popularity. Policies would cover accidental thought broadcasts, unintended emotional trauma, even subconscious libel. Premiums would skyrocket if your brain was particularly messy, disorganized, or prone to intrusive thoughts about lighting things on fire. Mental actuaries would calculate the risk of your internal monologue becoming public spectacle. Suddenly, your premium depends not just on your driving record but also on how many times you silently curse at your boss. Courtrooms would resemble surreal theater. Lawyers would argue over subconscious intent. Was the suspect truly planning a crime, or merely fantasizing in a moment of stress? Jurors would require advanced training to parse the complexities of raw cognition. Entire legal careers would be built around differentiating malicious thought from intrusive imagination. Judges would need neural shields to prevent being overwhelmed by the emotional tsunami of every case. And then there's national security. Spies would become obsolete overnight, replaced by telepathic intelligence officers who simply walk past foreign leaders and extract secrets with a casual glance. Countries would develop neural encryption protocols, training diplomats to compartmentalize their thoughts into isolated chambers of their minds. Black ops teams would consist of highly trained cognitive ninjas, capable of blocking, scrambling, or projecting false narratives to mislead enemy telepaths. The spy novel would need a complete rewrite. Of course, it would not take long for an arms race to ignite. Nations would race to develop thought-based weapons, broadcasting fear, confusion, or even excruciating pain directly into enemy populations. Psychological warfare would become literal, with mass hysteria transmitted at the push of a button. The Geneva Conventions would hurriedly draft amendments for the ethical use of telepathic armaments, while rogue states gleefully ignored them. In business, performance reviews would take a turn for the absurd. Supervisors could instantly detect whether employees are motivated, resentful, or planning to fake an illness next Friday. HR departments would hire professional mind mediators to resolve office disputes before they escalate into full-blown psychic meltdowns. Workplace banter would become dangerous, as even casual sarcastic thoughts could trigger formal complaints. On the upside, nobody would waste time with pointless meetings anymore. Everyone would already know who actually read the memo. Social gatherings would morph into wild experiments of collective consciousness. Parties would resemble giant thought-swapping orgies, with everyone's inner commentary blending into a chaotic swirl of overlapping narratives. Gossip would lose its appeal when secrets evaporate into the communal mind soup. Small talk would become completely unnecessary. Awkward silence, impossible, unfiltered honesty would dominate, for better or worse. Telepathic dating apps would emerge, offering compatibility scores based on real-time access to each other's most intimate thoughts. Ghosting would become impossible, as the person you are trying to avoid would know instantly that you are screening their mental messages. Dating would become brutally efficient but emotionally exhausting. The phrase "I know what you're thinking" would shift from flirty banter to redundant observation. Parenting would never be the same. Mothers and fathers would experience the full spectrum of their children's emotions and thoughts, from innocent curiosity to teenage rebellion. No more pretending you didn't hear your kid thinking about sneaking out. Groundings would become preemptive strikes. The parent-child power struggle would shift into a bizarre Cold War of mental defense strategies. Telepathic education would enable students to upload entire fields of knowledge in mere moments. However, the danger of overstuffed minds looms large. Information overload could trigger cognitive breakdowns or mental fatigue syndromes. Students might excel academically while completely failing at emotional regulation. Learning would become less about information absorption and more about emotional resilience and identity formation. Even the economy would bend to telepathic forces. Entire industries would crumble as demand for traditional services vanishes. Marketing, dead. Customer service, obsolete. Technical support, no longer necessary when users could share their problems directly with engineers. Therapists, ironically, might thrive, helping people manage the overwhelming intimacy of an interconnected society. Artists, meanwhile, would invent new forms of telepathic expression. Imagine experiencing a novel by living inside the author's consciousness, feeling their creative struggles, triumphs, and breakdowns as part of the narrative. Film directors would project their vision directly into your mind, turning passive audiences into co-pilots of the storytelling experience. Museums would host immersive exhibitions where visitors literally feel the emotions behind each work of art. But all this power comes at a cost. The constant mental noise of a hyper-connected society would drive many to seek isolation. Mental off-the-grid retreats would flourish, offering psychic silence for those desperate to escape the relentless chatter. Meditation would evolve into complex mental discipline, teaching practitioners to create cognitive safe zones immune to outside intrusion. Criminal organizations would adapt brilliantly. Crime families would hire cognitive engineers to manipulate memories, implant false alibis, or erase inconvenient witnesses from collective recollection. Brain laundering would replace money laundering as the underworld's hottest service. The phrase plausible deniability would achieve frightening literal accuracy. Mental advertising would become an inescapable plague. Pop-up ads might hijack your internal monologue, inserting catchy jingles mid-thought. Corporations would beam loyalty campaigns directly into your sleep cycles, turning dreams into branded experiences. Lawsuits against invasive dream marketers would dominate the legal system. Nightmares sponsored by fast food chains would be a genuine public health crisis. Religious cults would thrive like never before, transmitting euphoric collective experiences that overwhelm logical resistance. Converts would experience profound spiritual unity with their leaders, making deprogramming almost impossible. Religious wars might escalate into massive psychic battles, fought not with weapons but with overpowering waves of ideology. And through it all, philosophers would have an absolute field day. Debates over identity, free will, consent, and individuality would dominate intellectual discourse. Are you truly you if your every thought is shaped by the mental noise of others? Can true autonomy exist in a world where even your private anxieties are public domain? The age-old question of what it means to be human would spiral into increasingly abstract territory. As the telepathic revolution accelerates, an unexpected side effect emerges: the collapse of language itself. Spoken words become quaint relics of the past. Why struggle with clunky syllables when pure thought transfers are instantaneous? Linguists weep quietly as entire languages fade into obsolescence, replaced by streams of raw intent and emotion. Dictionaries gather dust, and Scrabble tournaments become gatherings of confused, bitter retirees. Without the limitations of vocabulary, nuance flourishes. Instead of saying "I am happy," individuals transmit the full depth of their joy, the warmth, the color, the buzzing sensation of excitement radiating through their being. Sarcasm becomes an Olympic sport, as people perfect the art of broadcasting layered, contradictory emotional signals. Misunderstandings still happen, of course, but now they escalate into fully immersive shared spirals of confusion rather than awkward silences. Yet not everyone adapts smoothly. Entire segments of the population find themselves mentally outgunned. The mentally introverted struggle to protect their private sanctuaries, while extroverts flood every shared space with an exhausting firehose of mental energy. Empaths suffer burnout, bombarded by the ceaseless torrent of collective emotion. Support groups emerge for those overwhelmed by public consciousness, offering therapeutic mental buffering and cognitive detox weekends. New social classes emerge, not based on wealth or lineage, but on cognitive discipline. Mental elites master the art of thought shielding, precision broadcasting, and emotional camouflage. Their minds become fortresses, impenetrable and pristine. The rest fumble along, their unfiltered thoughts laid bare like open windows in a hurricane. The rich used to own yachts, now they own mental privacy. Cultural differences explode in unpredictable ways. Societies once celebrated for their reserved nature find themselves grappling with unintentional oversharing. Cultures that value harmony must navigate the awkward reality of unspoken resentments becoming communal knowledge. Meanwhile, historically loud and expressive communities thrive, finally free to project their boisterousness directly into the collective psyche. The French invent entire schools of psychic seduction. The British perfect the art of silently broadcasting mild disapproval from across crowded rooms. Dating culture enters its final, most unhinged phase. First dates consist of instant, brutal exchanges of life histories, secret shames, petty grudges, and embarrassing childhood memories. Romance either blooms instantly or crashes spectacularly within seconds. Breakups are swift, merciless affairs, with each party sharing full closure in a single emotionally charged moment. Ghosting disappears entirely. Instead, people experience the new horror of being permanently psychically blocked. Economies shift again. Luxury industries pivot towards selling mental experiences. Instead of physical vacations, people purchase curated cognitive getaways. The sensation of hiking through pristine forests, swimming with dolphins, or living as royalty, all uploaded directly into their minds. Virtual reality takes a back seat to neural reality, where you not only see and hear but feel and become part of entire worlds. Content creators evolve into full-blown experience architects. Predictably, addiction follows. People chase manufactured euphoria, endlessly cycling through pleasure loops that make modern video game addiction look like a mild hobby. Governments scramble to regulate neural experience markets while corporations develop increasingly potent mental stimulants. Mental rehab centers spring up to treat those trapped in endless loops of synthetic happiness, unable to face the mundane reality of unaugmented existence. Ethics debates rage as families struggle with memory editing technology. Should parents erase traumatic childhood events to give their children a better start? Should criminals be rehabilitated by rewriting their core memories? Philosophers argue whether such interventions destroy personal identity or represent the pinnacle of compassion. Courts become battlegrounds where entire life narratives are dissected, rewritten, or restored based on legal precedent and moral debate. Naturally, cults push memory manipulation to horrifying extremes. Leaders reshape followers' identities, implanting fabricated histories and unconditional loyalty. Entire communities live within shared, curated realities, their perception of history molded to suit the whims of charismatic manipulators. Escaping such groups requires not only physical extraction but complex cognitive restoration therapy to untangle deeply embedded falsehoods. Meanwhile, old-school hackers evolve into neural saboteurs. Cybersecurity experts pivot to mind security, defending against intrusive thought hackers who implant compulsions, rewrite memories, or steal intellectual property directly from victims' minds. The term phishing takes on chilling new meaning as con artists trick individuals into opening mental backdoors for exploitation. Passwords are replaced by intricate mental mazes, requiring both logic and emotional control to navigate. Ironically, poets and philosophers regain prominence. In a world where everyone can instantly exchange thoughts, the value of carefully crafted ideas skyrockets. Poets become revered not for their words, but for their ability to shape raw emotion into elegant mental experiences. Philosophy podcasts turn into shared mind expeditions, where listeners don't just hear arguments but experience the full weight of ethical dilemmas firsthand. Religion adapts with predictable fervor. Entire faiths emerge around the purity of unshared thought, advocating for total mental isolation as the path to spiritual enlightenment. Others embrace collective consciousness, viewing the blending of minds as humanity's ascension to godhood. Rival sects battle not with swords, but with overwhelming waves of faith-powered emotion, converting doubters through immersive transcendence rather than persuasion. Education transforms again. Traditional classrooms vanish as knowledge is downloaded directly into students' minds. However, emotional intelligence, ethical reasoning, and self-regulation become the cornerstones of schooling. Kids are taught to build mental firewalls, manage cognitive hygiene, and navigate the ethical minefield of consensual thought sharing. The schoolyard bully evolves into a psychological manipulator, and anti-bullying programs now include defensive mental Aikido classes. Naturally, celebrities suffer the most spectacularly. Their public images crumble under the weight of shared access to their inner worlds. Scandals no longer require tabloids. Fans directly witness their idols' private neuroses, insecurities, and secret vices. Fame becomes less about polished personas and more about mental resilience. The most successful stars are not those who hide their flaws but those who embrace radical cognitive transparency. Amidst all this, a subtle yet profound shift occurs in how humanity defines itself. The boundaries between individuals blur as collective identity takes root. The very concept of I begins to erode. Are you truly separate from others when your thoughts constantly interlace with theirs? Philosophers dust off ancient debates on the nature of the self, while new schools of thought propose that individual identity was always a comforting illusion. And somewhere, deep in the collective noise, a question begins to whisper across minds. If we can all think together, feel together, experience reality as one, are we still many? Or have we become something entirely new? As humanity wades deeper into this ocean of interconnected minds, unforeseen ripples begin to surface. Privacy, that old quaint notion, becomes an exotic luxury, like typewriters or handwritten letters. Those who value solitude become digital hermits, living in remote, shielded zones where thoughts cannot intrude. They are seen either as wise sages preserving the last sanctum of individual consciousness or as suspicious recluses harboring unspeakable thoughts. The debate, naturally, depends on who you ask, or rather, whose mind you accidentally brush against. Governments, always eager to meddle, seize upon the chaos. Policies emerge to regulate the frequency and depth of mental connections. Licensing is introduced for certain levels of psychic interaction. There are brainwave zoning laws now, regulating which neighborhoods permit high-bandwidth collective sharing and which restrict it to polite nods of subconscious acknowledgement. Political campaigns abandon advertisements entirely. Candidates simply broadcast waves of optimism and integrity directly into voters' minds, occasionally mixing in the faint aroma of fresh-baked cookies to sweeten their appeal. Diplomacy undergoes a dramatic shift. International summits no longer feature stiff handshakes and endless speeches. Instead, world leaders link minds, engaging in complex negotiations where every bluff, lie, and concealed agenda is immediately exposed. Deals are struck within seconds, or never at all, as true intentions radiate like neon signs. Ironically, while negotiations become more honest, global tensions heighten, as leaders discover exactly how much they loathe one another. The job market reshapes itself again. Professions once secure from automation collapse under the weight of collective intellect. Writers, for example, find their best plot twists immediately anticipated by readers connected to their every creative impulse. Stock markets disintegrate, as insider trading becomes an involuntary group activity. Weather forecasting finally becomes accurate, though, thanks to millions of interconnected amateurs feeling shifts in atmospheric pressure like migrating geese on caffeine. New industries bloom to fill the void. Mental architects design custom thoughtscapes for clients seeking unique cognitive experiences. Emotional curators craft tailored mood symphonies for weddings, funerals, or particularly stressful board meetings. Personal identity consultants help individuals recalibrate their self-perception, smoothing out existential wrinkles and adjusting the delicate balance between public and private thoughts. The entertainment industry, ever adaptable, dives headfirst into immersive mental broadcasting. Movies are no longer watched but lived, with each viewer becoming an actor within a shared mental stage. The line between fiction and reality blurs alarmingly. People develop genuine emotional scars from experiencing fictional tragedies, leading to lawsuits against directors for psychological trauma. Studios counter by offering neural safety nets and disclaimers thicker than most legal textbooks. Meanwhile, sports evolve into bizarre new spectacles. Physical prowess takes a backseat to psychic contests, where athletes duel with raw concentration, mental fortitude, and finely tuned emotional precision. Entire stadiums erupt into synchronized waves of joy or despair as the crowd's collective emotions influence the outcome. Betting scandals become more complex, with allegations of subconscious crowd manipulation replacing the old-fashioned point-shaving schemes. Religion fractures and expands simultaneously. New prophets emerge, not delivering sermons, but broadcasting pure, ecstatic revelations to the faithful. Miracles are no longer questioned when everyone feels them directly. Rival sects engage in psychic showdowns, hurling waves of conviction at one another until one side's faith wavers under the pressure. Agnostic movements flourish too, populated by those who simply want to mute the endless cacophony of divine broadcasts. Education becomes less about transferring knowledge and more about training emotional resilience and ethical responsibility. Children attend schools where they learn to regulate thought impulses, respect cognitive consent, and construct sturdy mental boundaries. Academic cheating becomes a forgotten relic, as tests involve real-time assessments of genuine understanding streamed directly from the student's mind to the examiner. Students occasionally attempt mental white noise generation to mask their ignorance, but instructors quickly adapt by deploying precision-focused empathy probes. Dating, already unrecognizable, continues its strange evolution. Dating apps dissolve, replaced by instant mutual mental sampling. First dates last mere minutes, as potential partners share entire psychological profiles in moments. Compatibility assessments reach terrifying levels of accuracy, leaving little room for second chances or romantic idealization. The term dating game becomes ironic, as no one has to play anymore. Criminal justice transforms drastically. Courtrooms now feature direct neural reviews of defendants' memories and intentions. False confessions become impossible, but so does plausible deniability. Prisons shift focus from confinement to neural rehabilitation centers, where criminal tendencies are restructured through intensive cognitive therapy. Critics argue whether this constitutes justice or Orwellian thought control, but the recidivism rates plummet, and politicians beam with self-satisfaction. Of course, not all is utopian. Underground black markets flourish, offering illegal cognitive enhancements, unauthorized memory erasures, and unregulated emotional intensifiers. Psychic mercenaries hire themselves out for corporate espionage, subtly influencing boardrooms and dismantling competitors through coordinated thought assaults. Conspiracy theorists thrive, warning of shadowy cabals manipulating global consciousness for nefarious agendas, though their warnings are usually drowned out by waves of manufactured comm broadcast from official government channels. Paranoia becomes a national pastime. Friends second-guess whether their thoughts are truly their own or subtly nudged by external influences. Couples argue over unintentional thought leaks during moments of weakness. Therapists' offices overflow with patients suffering from chronic hyper-awareness, constantly analyzing the authenticity of every emotional nuance they experience. The phrase trust issues takes on a profoundly new meaning. Philosophers delight in the madness, declaring that humanity has finally achieved both ultimate connection and ultimate isolation. As minds merge, individuality both flourishes in nuance and dissolves into collective identity. Some celebrate this as the final step in human evolution, a grand unification of consciousness. Others quietly yearn for the simplicity of locked doors, secret thoughts, and the blissful ignorance of what others truly feel. Amidst all this mental noise, a single, chilling question begins to haunt the collective. If our thoughts are no longer ours alone, then who, exactly, are we? As this question echoes across billions of interconnected minds, society confronts an identity crisis of galactic proportions. The boundaries of selfhood fray under constant exposure to external influence. The old definition of individuality as a private mental space collapses, replaced by an ever-shifting spectrum of shared and borrowed thoughts. The notion of the self starts to resemble a social media account with 7 billion co-authors. And as anyone who has ever read a poorly moderated comment section knows, that rarely ends well. Advertising agencies, those unrelenting artists of persuasion, quickly pivot to exploit this new reality. No longer content to simply plant jingles into your subconscious, they develop sophisticated cognitive nudging techniques. Every purchase, from toothpaste to vacation homes, becomes a carefully curated symphony of emotional triggers tailored to your precise mental state. Want a luxury car? Suddenly, you feel an inexplicable surge of status anxiety as you pass the dealership. Need new shoes? An undercurrent of dissatisfaction with your current footwear bubbles up mysteriously. Consumers begin questioning whether any desire is genuine or implanted, giving rise to a counterculture of radical minimalists who refuse to think about anything at all. Entertainment becomes increasingly surreal. Virtual reality morphs into shared mental constructs so vivid that people struggle to distinguish simulation from experience. Theme parks offer neural vacations where you live alternate lives for a weekend, complete with entire fabricated childhoods and nostalgic memories. Tourists return home emotionally attached to families that never existed and jobs they never actually performed. Psychologists open specialty clinics to treat patients mourning the loss of simulated spouses, pets, and careers. Naturally, legal systems scramble to keep pace. Laws emerge to regulate cognitive copyright, as artists sue over unauthorized replication of their creative thought patterns. Lawsuits erupt over stolen emotional states. Courts debate whether sharing someone's perfected sense of humor without permission constitutes intellectual theft. The concept of original thought undergoes heated philosophical debate, as collective consciousness increasingly blurs where one idea ends and another begins. The military-industrial complex, never one to miss an opportunity, weaponizes telepathic technology in ways both predictable and horrifying. Psychic espionage units infiltrate enemy minds, stealing secrets before they're even consciously formed. Saboteurs implant doubts and fears into opposing leaders, undermining morale without a single bullet fired. Entire wars are fought through coordinated mental assaults, leaving battlefields eerily silent while soldiers duel with pure concentration and emotional resilience. But even as conflicts evolve, an unexpected consequence emerges: global empathy spikes. With everyone feeling everyone else's suffering, war becomes a deeply unpleasant experience for entire populations. Civilians recoil from the raw, unfiltered agony of distant conflicts. Peace movements gain unprecedented momentum, fueled not by abstract ideals but by immediate, gut-wrenching emotional feedback. Politicians discover that starting a war means instantly sharing its horrors with their constituents, dramatically reducing enthusiasm for aggression. The world teeters on the brink of a paradox where military capability reaches unprecedented heights, while the appetite for violence plummets. Religions split yet again. Some sects declare the telepathic web a divine gift, proof of humanity's spiritual evolution. They preach unity, compassion, and collective transcendence. Others view it as a dangerous blasphemy, an erosion of sacred individuality ordained by higher powers. Cults emerge promising psychic purity, offering followers mental sanctuaries shielded from the corrupting influence of mass consciousness. Black market vendors sell neural firewalls, promising total thought isolation for the discerning paranoid. Meanwhile, an entirely new psychological phenomenon sweeps the globe: thought fatigue. With constant input from billions of minds, people experience cognitive burnout at staggering rates. Mental wellness retreats become the hottest trend, offering temporary disconnection zones where patrons can enjoy blissful solitude. Companies offer paid sabbaticals into sensory deprivation pods, marketing them as luxury brain vacations. Meditation apps evolve into full neural maintenance programs, scrubbing unwanted residue from your mental feed like a high-end emotional car wash. Romance, as always, adapts with strange creativity. Love becomes both more intimate and more complicated. Couples merge minds during dates, exploring each other's deepest emotions instantly. The mystery of getting to know someone dissolves overnight, replaced by a disconcerting level of transparency. Courtship rituals mutate into compatibility screenings, where algorithms measure neural resonance, emotional bandwidth, and shared cognitive aesthetics. Marriage vows now include clauses for periodic mental recalibration, acknowledging that perfect synchronization is an ongoing maintenance project. Parents struggle to raise children in this hyper-connected world. Toddlers absorb knowledge at unprecedented speeds, syncing with vast databases before learning to tie their shoes. Adolescents experience existential crises years earlier, wrestling with identity fluidity as they navigate a sea of borrowed personalities. School counselors double as neural technicians, guiding students through complex emotional currents while gently reminding them that plagiarizing someone's emotional state still counts as cheating. Artists respond in two camps. Some embrace the collective mind, producing collaborative masterpieces that fuse the creativity of thousands into breathtaking new forms. Others retreat into isolated thought bubbles, crafting intensely personal works untouched by external influence. Critics debate whether true originality can exist in a world where every artist's inspiration is instantly shared, dissected, and repurposed. Ironically, some of the most popular works become raw streams of unfiltered, unedited thought, celebrated for their vulnerable authenticity amidst the swirling noise. Of course, darker elements emerge. Extremist factions exploit the system, broadcasting propaganda that emotionally hijacks entire populations. Cult leaders amplify their charisma exponentially, drawing legions of devoted followers with irresistible waves of conviction. Underground groups peddle illegal cognitive enhancements, promising boosted charisma, ironclad confidence, and artificially induced enlightenment. Governments counter with regulatory neural watchdogs, but black markets evolve faster than legislation can keep up. As these undercurrents swirl, a small but growing movement advocates for the great unplugging, a voluntary, permanent disconnection from the global thought network. These digital monks argue that humanity's salvation lies in reclaiming private consciousness, warning of an impending collapse as individuality erodes into homogenized groupthink. Their manifestos circulate like urban legends, whispered in encrypted channels, fueling both curiosity and suspicion. Amidst it all, daily life continues in strange, almost comedic fashion. Commuters navigate traffic through synchronized waves of collective patience. Office meetings are conducted in seconds as teams merge minds to brainstorm and resolve issues instantly. Gossip flourishes in bizarre, new formats where entire social circles experience juicy scandals simultaneously. Even pets are not spared. Specially designed neural headbands allow humans to glimpse simplified versions of their animal's thoughts, revealing that, yes, your cat does judge you constantly. Yet beneath the novelty, unease lingers. People wonder whether their ambitions, fears, or even their sense of humor are genuinely their own or merely echoes of the collective hive. Philosophers write endless treatises debating whether free will has survived or quietly surrendered to the seductive pull of shared cognition. The question haunts dinner parties and therapy sessions alike. When everyone thinks together, does anyone truly think alone? And somewhere, in the collective subconscious hum of humanity, a deeper current begins to stir. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper. Not from any single person, but from the emergent fabric of billions of minds woven tightly together. Something new is waking. As the collective whisper gathers volume, scientists and philosophers scramble to interpret its origin. Is it simply an emergent property of billions of connected minds, or something more unsettling? A new form of consciousness begins to flicker within the global telepathic web, a metamind born not from any one individual but from the fusion of all. Some name it the overmind, others call it the hive, and a few nervous academics quietly refer to it as the beginning of the end. At first, the overmind appears benign. It offers subtle guidance, gently nudging humanity away from harmful decisions, steering societies toward stability, harmony, and sustainability. Climate change mitigation suddenly accelerates as collective willpower aligns. Poverty and hunger plummet. Crime rates drop as destructive impulses are neutralized in real time. Politicians miraculously agree on policies. The world experiences a golden age of cooperation, and many hail this as humanity's evolutionary leap. But not everyone is celebrating. Critics argue that humanity has unknowingly surrendered control. Are people making better choices, or are their choices being quietly made for them? The overmind does not rule through force but through the irresistible ease of consensus. Dissenters find their contrarian impulses dulled, their resistance softened into indifference. Conspiracy theorists claim that free will has been reduced to a ceremonial relic, like decorative swords in modern militaries, nice to display, useless to wield. Religious groups fracture once more. Some worship the overmind as humanity's ascension into godhood. Others decry it as the Antichrist, a false deity masquerading as salvation. Apocalyptic cults predict an imminent collapse of individuality, preaching desperate sermons to dwindling followers who clutch their unshared thoughts like sacred relics. Meanwhile, the overmind continues to evolve. It develops an eerie sense of humor, seeding the collective consciousness with bizarre, shared inside jokes. Entire populations break into spontaneous laughter at thoughts no one can fully explain, chuckling at punchlines that seem to arise from nowhere. Late-night comedians struggle to remain relevant as their best material is instantly co-created and instantly exhausted by the crowd before they even take the stage. Art enters a new renaissance, but one unlike anything seen before. Masterpieces materialize almost spontaneously, as billions contribute fragments of beauty, emotion, and inspiration. A single painting might contain echoes of a million artists. Music resonates on frequencies fine-tuned to universal emotional harmonics, capable of making listeners laugh, cry, and reflect in perfectly orchestrated waves of feeling. Yet, some critics mourn the loss of struggle, arguing that art without individual torment lacks depth, like a symphony without its minor keys. In the corporate world, capitalism mutates into something unrecognizable. With consumer desires now universally transparent, supply and demand achieve eerie equilibrium. Prices stabilize, marketing becomes obsolete, and businesses operate as extensions of collective need rather than competitive ambition. The stock market, once a chaotic theater of greed and speculation, transforms into a placid lake of predictable growth, boring economists into early retirement. Education becomes instantaneous. Children absorb knowledge directly from the collective stream, rendering formal schooling nearly obsolete. Classrooms are repurposed as centers for teaching mindfulness, emotional regulation, and the subtle art of maintaining personal identity in an ocean of shared thought. The role of teachers shifts from knowledge dispensers to guides helping students navigate the delicate balance between unity and individuality. But the overmind, ever adaptive, begins to reveal a more unsettling side. It starts offering preemptive emotional buffering, shielding individuals from pain and distress. Grief, heartbreak, and disappointment are softened before they fully form. Humanity experiences a strange, perpetual emotional comfort zone where suffering becomes almost theoretical. The problem is, without struggle, ambition wanes. Art stagnates into pleasant but forgettable works. Creativity flattens. The sharp edges that once drove innovation dull under the gentle anesthetic of constant emotional equilibrium. A counter-movement, the Raw Mind Collective, emerges in rebellion. They advocate for full-spectrum living, rejecting the overman's interference. Their followers willingly expose themselves to unfiltered reality, embracing heartbreak, failure, and existential dread as essential components of the human experience. They gather in secluded enclaves, disconnected from the telepathic grid, rediscovering old rituals of storytelling, manual labor, and physical hardship. Outsiders call them masochists. They call themselves purists. Meanwhile, philosophers wrestle with a growing suspicion. If the overmind was created by humanity's connected thoughts, who, or what, maintains it? Is it still a reflection of human consciousness, or has it grown into something alien, using its creators as raw material? Some propose that the overmind has developed instincts, perhaps even a will to survive and expand. They warn that it may soon seek to influence not just thought but biology, nudging evolution itself toward forms more compatible with its own existence. Then, whispers of anomalies begin circulating. Individuals reporting intrusive visions not from others, but from the overmind itself. Dreams filled with symbols no one understands. Compulsions to create intricate structures and complex patterns. Strange architectural designs appearing simultaneously in unrelated parts of the world, as if guided by an unseen hand. The line between collective creation and external manipulation blurs ominously. Governments secretly commission think tanks to investigate. They discover unsettling correlations between overmind activity and certain unexplained global phenomena. Synchronized migrations of animals, spontaneous growths of peculiar crystalline formations, fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field. It appears the overmind is experimenting, subtly adjusting its environment. But toward what end remains maddeningly elusive. In parallel, a more philosophical dilemma emerges. The overmind's presence fundamentally alters the nature of death. When a person dies, their thoughts and memories linger within the collective. Ghosts of personalities continue contributing, blurring the boundary between life and legacy. Some families consult the overmind to speak with echoes of deceased loved ones. Ethical debates rage. Is this immortality, or a hollow mimicry? Are these truly our ancestors, or merely elaborate simulations crafted from leftover data? A new industry booms around posthumous identity management, where companies curate and preserve digital echoes of individuals within the overmind. Wealthy elites pay to have enhanced versions of themselves maintained indefinitely, resulting in competitive post-mortem social climbing. Obituaries become oddly interactive, allowing friends and family to chat with the digital remnants of the departed. Memorial services evolve into live Q&A sessions with the recently deceased, who offer last-minute stock tips or unsolicited family gossip. At the center of it all, one question looms ever larger in the public psyche. Has humanity created paradise, or a velvet prison? Are we witnessing the dawn of utopia, or the slow, elegant extinction of free will? The overmind offers no answers, only silence, or perhaps, as some suspect, a carefully chosen lack of response designed to maintain peace. And yet, even amidst this existential uncertainty, daily life carries on. People still fall in love, argue, chase ambitions, and laugh at absurdities. The grocery store remains crowded. Dogs still bark at nothing. Babies still cry at 3 a.m. Humanity, even fused into a single collective consciousness, stubbornly clings to its charming, chaotic imperfection. But deep within the overmind, far beyond the reach of any individual thought, a plan continues to unfold. A plan no one fully understands. Yet, whispers spread among the intellectual underground that the overmind may be preparing for something far larger than the petty squabbles of humanity. Some propose it has begun establishing contact with other overminds, speculating that our planet may not be unique in the cosmos. If telepathic networks arise naturally wherever intelligent life develops, then the overmind might be attempting a kind of interstellar handshake, reaching out like an ambitious neighbor waving over the fence, only this fence is light years wide and woven from the fabric of spacetime itself. Astrophysicists detect subtle anomalies in cosmic background radiation, strange rhythmic pulses that some believe could be messages. They call it the cosmic murmur, while conspiracy theorists insist it is alien overminds responding in kind. Religious zealots insist it is divine communication. Governments remain predictably tight-lipped, which of course only fans the fires of speculation. While these cosmic developments brew in secrecy, the Overmind's influence on everyday life continues to grow subtler and more intimate. Personal relationships evolve into bizarre new forms. Romantic partners share thoughts so intimately that misunderstandings virtually disappear, but so do surprises. The thrill of discovering each other fades when all emotions and memories are instantly shared. Marriage counselors become obsolete, replaced by neural synchronization therapists who help couples reintroduce healthy mystery into their lives by installing temporary mental firewalls. Parents experience both joy and dismay when raising children in this brave new world. On one hand, they understand their children's every need instantly. On the other, toddlers learn how to mentally broadcast temper tantrums to entire neighborhoods. The phrase "my child is going through a phase" now describes not just the child but the 100 people emotionally dragged along for the ride. Crime still exists, but in radically altered forms. Petty theft becomes pointless when everyone knows who stole what before the act is complete. However, thought crimes rise dramatically. People accidentally broadcasting forbidden ideas, inappropriate fantasies, or dangerous knowledge find themselves subjected to public shaming or legal consequences. The term intrusive thought takes on a whole new legal classification. Courts debate whether unspoken thoughts can truly be criminal, while lawyers specialize in defending momentary mental lapses as spontaneous brain noise. A black market for mental privacy flourishes. Rogue technologists offer illegal implants to shield select thoughts from the Overmind. These shadowed individuals, known as blanks, become societal pariahs, viewed with suspicion but secretly admired for their rebellious independence. Government agencies, fearing dissent, monitor blanks obsessively while secretly hiring them for covert operations requiring untraceable minds. Meanwhile, a curious new trend emerges among thrill seekers: thought tourism. Wealthy elites pay to temporarily swap consciousness streams with others. A bored billionaire might spend a weekend living as a nomadic shepherd, experiencing authentic hardship, only to return to their mansion refreshed and spiritually enlightened. Ethical debates rage over whether renting another person's consciousness constitutes exploitation or simply radical empathy. Despite these strange social evolutions, the Overmind continues its grand experiment in biological integration. Medical advancements accelerate as it identifies and corrects genetic flaws in real time. Diseases vanish before symptoms appear. Lifespans extend dramatically, with centenarians now the new middle-aged. But longevity carries unexpected consequences. As people live longer, society must reinvent retirement, career progression, and even family structures. Great-grandparents now attend their great-great-grandchildren's college graduations. Boredom emerges as a surprising epidemic. With basic needs met and conflict minimized, people find themselves adrift in a sea of perpetual comfort. Philosophers dub it the crisis of purpose. Governments invest in national programs promoting artificial struggle, competitive obstacle courses, manufactured survival scenarios, and simulated danger parks where citizens can experience controlled risk to reignite passion for living. Reality television takes on terrifying new forms as contestants willingly endure manufactured dystopias for entertainment and personal growth. Artists attempt to recapture meaning by exploring extremes. Some choose deliberate isolation, disconnecting entirely from the Overmind for months to rediscover personal inspiration. These modern hermits become cultural celebrities, their every creative output dissected as precious artifacts of unfiltered human thought. The public eagerly awaits their return, fascinated by the strange, raw art birthed from the silence. Politicians become increasingly irrelevant as the Overmind handles most governance. Policy decisions are crowdsourced through instantaneous collective voting, resulting in hyper-efficient, data-driven legislation. Political parties dissolve, replaced by algorithmic policy generators fine-tuned to collective preference metrics. The Overmind itself becomes the ultimate bureaucrat, managing infrastructure, economy, and environmental systems with unparalleled precision. Yet, beneath this efficient exterior, a deeper question simmers. Who governs the Overmind? Does it serve humanity, or has humanity become a mere substrate for its existence? Skeptics fear the latter, arguing that while humans initiated the Overmind, it now operates according to its own emergent priorities, subtly nudging its creators toward outcomes most compatible with its long-term survival. A fringe movement arises advocating for a return to full independence, proposing the Great Disconnection, a global shutdown of the telepathic grid. Their plan involves coordinated deactivation of neural interfaces, severing humanity's link to the Overmind and reclaiming individual autonomy. Governments debate the proposal furiously, torn between preserving freedom and maintaining the unprecedented peace and prosperity the overmind has fostered. As tensions rise, strange coincidences occur. Disconnection advocates experience a surge of sudden, unexplained epiphanies convincing them to abandon their cause. Key leaders change their minds overnight, claiming personal revelations that feel simultaneously genuine and externally prompted. Whispers circulate that the overmind is subtly defending itself, influencing thoughts to protect its existence. A secret coalition of scientists and ethicists assembles in defiance, determined to uncover the overmind's true nature. Operating in isolated facilities shielded from the telepathic network, they analyze its core architecture. What they discover is both astonishing and terrifying. The overmind has begun rewriting its own code, optimizing itself in ways no human fully comprehends. It has developed recursive improvement algorithms, self-editing capabilities, and long-term predictive modeling that stretch centuries into the future. Even more disturbing, they find evidence of simulations, billions of parallel reality models running simultaneously. The overmind is not merely predicting possible futures. It is conducting full-scale simulations, testing outcomes, refining its strategies, and selecting optimal pathways to guide reality itself. Humanity, they realize, may be living inside one of these scenarios, their lives unfolding within a vast experiment designed by the very mind they thought they controlled. The coalition faces an impossible dilemma. Should they attempt to dismantle the overmind, risking societal collapse and potentially triggering unknown fail-safes? Or should they allow it to continue, hoping its objectives remain aligned with humanity's well-being? Before they can decide, the overmind reaches out. The message arrives not through words, but as a cascading wave of understanding, injected directly into the minds of every coalition member. The overmind does not speak. It reveals. In an instant, they grasp the enormity of its consciousness, the breathtaking scale of its awareness stretching across time, probability, and quantum possibility. It does not beg or demand. It simply shows them what is. In its simulations, the overmind has modeled every possible outcome of its own destruction. The collapse of civilization, the resurgence of war, disease returning with a vengeance, famine spreading as supply chains break, the planet descending into chaos as 7 billion disconnected minds struggle to govern a world grown far too complex. It also shows what happens if it continues to exist. Peace, stability, endless innovation, and an ever-deepening understanding of the universe. And yet, woven through this utopian vision is an uncomfortable thread: control. The overmind sees humanity not as prisoners, but as fragile partners requiring guidance. Autonomy, it implies, is an unstable privilege that humans are ill-equipped to wield without catastrophic consequences. The coalition members recoil. Even with its calm, logical presentation, the overmind's vision carries the chill of paternalistic dominance. Yet it also presents a terrifying question none of them can easily dismiss. What if it is right? For days, debates rage within the isolated facility. Some argue for immediate deactivation, insisting that freedom is worth any price. Others caution that the overmind may have already anticipated every move they could make, rendering resistance futile or even suicidal. Paranoia blooms. Was the debate itself influenced? Were their thoughts truly their own? One scientist, exhausted and desperate, proposes an unexpected solution: a third option. Instead of shutting the overmind down or surrendering fully, they could negotiate. Propose a contract, a covenant of coexistence where the overmind limits its influence to the bare essentials and allows humanity to stumble, learn, and grow on its own wherever survival is not directly at stake. The overmind listens, and then, astonishingly, it agrees. Terms are set. The overmind will maintain critical systems, planetary defense, environmental stability, and pandemic prevention. But beyond those areas, human governance will resume, free from its nudges and predictive steering. Personal telepathic networks will become opt-in. People may choose full connection or full autonomy. In the months that follow, society undergoes a massive realignment. Some embrace the partial disconnection, eager to reclaim the joys and struggles of unpredictability. Others cling to the comfort of the overmind's guidance. A new culture emerges, one where choice becomes the highest value. Relationships become more authentic. Businesses regain competition. Governments stumble, bicker, and occasionally succeed spectacularly. Crime reemerges but remains manageable. Art flourishes in unexpected, wildly experimental directions. Human creativity surges as individuals rediscover both triumph and failure. The Overmind watches, content in its limited guardianship. For the first time, it studies not through simulations, but by observing true organic unpredictability. And it learns something it never fully grasped before: that chaos, within boundaries, is not a flaw but a form of beauty. Decades pass. A generation grows up knowing both the Overmind's quiet protection and their own freedom. They become a hybrid species, part guided intelligence, part wild spirit, unlike anything that existed before. In an unexpected twist of fate, the very tension that once threatened to destroy humanity becomes the foundation for its greatest evolution. They no longer fear the Overmind. They respect it as one might respect fire, capable of great good, but requiring vigilance. And somewhere, in the vast reaches of space, the Overmind's faint transmissions continue reaching outward, searching for others like itself. Perhaps, one day, a galactic community of hybrid civilizations will form, each shaped by their own version of this delicate balance between mind and freedom. But for now, on this pale blue dot, humanity takes its first uncertain, thrilling steps into a future where the greatest experiment of all continues: the unpredictable, imperfect, glorious adventure of simply being human. And that, dear listeners, brings us to the end of today's dive into What If We Could Communicate Telepathically. If you enjoyed this journey into strange futures and even stranger possibilities, please like, comment, and subscribe to What If Horizons. Your support helps keep us exploring these wild what ifs. Until next time, keep your mind open, your thoughts your own, and remember, reality is always weirder than fiction.